We, as human beings, inherently value those who are able to commit to one idea, ideal, person, or group. This may be because, in an evolutionary sense, it promotes teamsmanship and the groupthink mentality that helped us to evolve and survive over the ages. Or it could be that we simply like those who give themselves wholly to a particular pursuit because it means that they will inevitably become an expert in that field and thus they will be able to more effectively contribute to the zeitgeist. Regardless, the point is that we value commitment. It is innately attractive in all facets of life. We find boyfriends or girlfriends who commit to us wholeheartedly very attractive. We like it when an actor becomes so entrenched and committed to their character that they go beyond the normal bounds that constrain their industry and instead break free of such conventions and proceed into greatness. And yes, we even find it appealing in video games. In game design, it is common to have one key idea or theme that drives development. Call it a keystone or the emotional inspiration. Basically, the one thing that any artist in the studio can look at for inspiration and guidance. These things are what development studios that are truly great must commit to in order to find success. For example, I saw a great interview a long time ago with Todd Howard wherein he gave a tour of Bethesda game studios. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is he bringing up the studio head behind the worst rated AAA game of the year? But don't worry, we're going to loop back to all of that in just a moment. But first, the interview. The video was produced to promote Skyrim back in 2011, which many argue was their best game and was the last time that they seemed to have all of their ducks in a row. The reason I'm bringing this interview up is because in it, Todd Howard describes how, during the development of Fallout 3, he had a statue on his desk and he would always look to that statue for inspiration when it came to Skyrim. When someone would walk into his office and ask, "What are we going to do for the next Elder Scrolls game?" he would simply point to the statue and say, "That. We're doing that." For Skyrim, the founding idea, the keystone thought, was not a monetization model or a gameplay feature or mechanic. It wasn't even a particular franchise. It was something much more ethereal, a feeling, an emotion. When that statue was gazed upon, it inevitably gave the viewer a feeling of the wilderness that they were going to portray. They would look at the statue's acts and understand just how harsh this world would be. They would see the strained face of the character and sympathize with his struggle. They would feel. And that feeling would drive every development decision that they made. I am thoroughly convinced that this is why Skyrim has such a different feel than that of Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, the games released just before and after Skyrim. Those games were clearly developed with Todd's interpretation of the franchise itself driving the development process. For this reason, the games feel as though they were developed towards a mechanic, an artificial end. Think of it like being pulled towards a destination versus being pushed. Skyrim was pushed with the force of its emotional impact behind it, whereas the Fallout games were pulled into place by the studio's desire for what they should end up being. It's a small difference, I grant you, but when we're talking about open-world narrative game design, it is very important. Bethesda committed to an emotion that drove them. They didn't know what the game would look like when it was done, and more importantly, they didn't care. Nor should they have. When being pushed in this way, the whole point is that you are being guided, not trying to manipulate the moving force into obedience to you. As for a recent release, look at Red Dead Redemption 2. This game is phenomenal for a variety of reasons, but primarily because of its delicate use of world tonality and narrative world design. If you read the interviews that the developers have given about the process of building this game, they talk a lot about the feeling that the player should have. When riding across the plains, you should have a solemn feeling of this grand expanse laid out before you. It should be both welcoming and intimidating. It should make you excited and scared. It should make you feel. They did not make this game around a particular mechanic or idea of what Red Dead is all about. Instead, they identified an emotion and committed to it, letting it push them to where they needed to be. This is what makes the game so great, the embrace of the chaos that could ensue if this idea were left unchecked. And it is not just an embrace, but a committed embrace, where the instigator refuses to give up on the idea or subject, no matter how difficult it may be to progress. When this is done well, we end up with some of the greatest and most influential games in history. However, when done poorly, we end up with, well, Fallout 76. The reason I brought up Todd Howard earlier was so that I could contrast this clearly. You see, Bethesda knows how important it is to commit to a feeling. They have done it before. Specifically, Todd Howard has given interviews about how important it is. And so this begs the question, how could they have gone so far astray with their newest game? And, well, I think there's a couple possible answers to that. For one, it is possible that Bethesda was simply experimenting with a different idea and it went poorly. That is the simplest answer and possibly the correct one, but it's also the least interesting. Another possibility, and the one that I find much more interesting and likely, is that Bethesda was developing the game around a mechanic which meant that it lacked all of the emotion of all of their previous titles. They decided that it was going to be always online. Okay, that's not a crime, but you can't leave it there. Do you think World of Warcraft became the phenomenon that it was and is by just throwing crap together on a server? No. They built the game around the sense of adventure that they wanted to convey and they wanted the player to feel, and then they fit the online elements around it. Fallout 76 lacks life because it wasn't created with any. It was developed to showcase a mechanic, Fallout with friends. That's where the creative design stopped and the business took over. They honestly thought that they could just say, make Fallout 4 set in West Virginia and then we'll put it online after stripping it of all the narrative crap that only Reddit seems to like. And they honestly believed it would work. No matter where I look, I can't see any passion in this game. It's all just obligatory garbage. Yeah, it's big, yeah, it's got a lot of junk to collect and craft, but it doesn't have any of that emotional magic that made Skyrim so special. Now there's of course the obvious retort, which is that Fallout 76 was never supposed to be that kind of game. It was never supposed to be another Skyrim or Fallout 3. It was supposed to be a spin-off that just happened to share a company logo. While that might be true, it doesn't change the fact that these games were not developed with the same philosophies, and the one that bucked the trend happened to suck. Coincidence? I think not. Another example would be God of War. This game was a reinvention of a previously established franchise. It had a lot to do. It would have been very easy to simply focus on a single reinvention, such as the camera angle shift to third person, the new combat system, or even the change from Greek to Norse mythology. But instead, Cory Barlog, the game's director, decided to base the entire game off of a relationship. Specifically, the relationship between Kratos and Atreus as father and son, heavily inspired by Barlog's own experience as a father. Once again, a feeling was the basis of the entire game's design. The combat, the graphics, the art style, the world design, the animations, everything was built on this one concept, and it worked. God of War is, for many, the best game of the year, all the way up there with the likes of Red Dead Redemption 2, the game we just talked about. And there are many other examples I could point to, such as Fallout New Vegas, The Witcher 3, Mad Max, and possibly the most obvious one, The Last of Us. It is clear, when games commit to an emotion or feeling as the core of their design, when the game is a narrative-driven title, it sets the stage for immediate success. And sure, there are a lot of moving pieces, such as the fact that you still need high-quality work done on all of the other elements of the game. Barlog and his team couldn't just say that they were designing the game around an emotion and call it good, but the point is that it lays a foundation that a stringent machine can be built atop. All told, as with all artful endeavors, the artist must commit to their vision in order for it to be effective. The whole point of a piece of art is that it conveys and communicates a message, evokes an emotion, makes you feel. When games don't commit to an emotion or feeling, it can and will come off as odd. It feels artificial, forced, or even corporate. There's no passion, no love, no magic. All we can hope is that development studios like Bethesda can learn to regain their artistic confidence and that we get to experience the effects of it once again. After all, it's rare to find a studio that can do this even once, much less repeatedly, which is why studios like Bethesda, Rockstar, Nintendo, Naughty Dog, and CD Projekt Red are held in such high regard. When you exhibit excellence, that is what is eventually demanded of you. And let's just hope that these guys stick around and don't fall to the same fate as so many other studios who came before.